The storm rolled in just past midnight, its rain tapping softly against the window panes, the wind winding through the trees like a breath held too long in the Carter home. The world remained still and quiet, sleeping until Emily woke, screaming. Sarah was there in an instant, pulling her trembling daughter close as Emily bolted upright in bed. Her voice, silent for weeks, finally broke through the darkness. "He's still watching me," she whispered. It wasn't just the words, it was the certainty behind them, a tone so deeply rooted in fear that Sarah's skin crawled. She stared at Emily, hands trembling as she brushed damp hair from her daughter's face. "Sweetheart, who's watching you?" Emily didn't answer. Instead, her fingers searched for the comforting weight of Rex's fur. The German Shepherd had already leapt onto the bed, positioning himself between Emily and the window, as if shielding her from the night itself. He let out a low whine, not out of distress, but recognition. An hour later, Sarah sat across from Agent Jack Monroe in the conference room at the Seattle field office. Her voice trembled, eyes heavy with both fear and exhaustion. Emily sat beside her, unnervingly calm now, clutching Rex's leash in one hand, a red crayon in the other. Monroe watched the little girl closely. The nightmares were nothing new, but this time she had spoken. More importantly, she had drawn. Emily slid a picture across the table. The lines were crude, the shadows hurried, but the image was unmistakable. A tall figure in a long coat, with a face hidden behind a mask. Not a Halloween mask, something darker, smooth, featureless, wrong. Monroe leaned in. "You've seen him before?" Emily gave the smallest nod. Lisa Carter, tech specialist, entered, holding a tablet. "Jack," she said, her voice sharp, "you need to see this." They moved to the adjacent operations room. Lisa pulled up an audio file, one from the encrypted folders they'd recovered from Hale's warehouse. Until now, the file had been unreadable, but Lisa had cracked the code just moments before Emily's nightmare. The voice that played wasn't Hale's. It wasn't Klein's. It was colder, distorted, but unnervingly calm. "Burn the shipment, all of it. Leave nothing. The girl wasn't supposed to survive. Hall failed. Klein compromised. Reset the cycle." The silence that followed was suffocating. Lisa looked up. "This isn't just trafficking. It's military-grade precision, logistics, coded language. They don't see these kids as victims, Jack. They see them as assets." Jack leaned against the table, still staring at the waveform as if it might reveal more. "The masked man," he said quietly. "He's the one giving the orders. Hale and Klein were just pawns." Sarah's voice barely broke through the tension. "You think he's still out there?" Jack's gaze flickered to Emily, who now stared out the window, her expression unreadable, Rex's head resting gently in her lap. "He never left," Jack said, his voice low. "He's just waiting for us to catch up." He stepped into the hall to take a call from Quantico, updates on the facial reconstruction of the masked figure. The sketch created from Emily's description and the voice data had triggered an old flag in the database, an alias, a ghost. No real name, but a record of movements in 6 different countries and 3 unsolved child disappearances. Codename, Ward. Jack's jaw tightened. "We've got a name now. We need his network." He returned to the room, meeting Lisa's gaze. "Anything else on the audio?" She nodded. "Yes." One line repeated, almost like a mantra. "I ran it through decryption twice to be sure." She typed in the phrase, "The chain must not break." Jack stared at the words, a chill crawling down his spine. "Then it's time we broke it ourselves." Rex barked once, sharp and decisive. Just like that, the hunt began again. The rain had just started when they reached the outskirts of Tacoma, a desolate sprawl of rusted fences and half-collapsed warehouses that hadn't seen legitimate activity in years. Jack Monroe stepped out of the black SUV, boots crunching against gravel soaked by the drizzle. Beside him, Rex jumped down with the practiced grace of an old soldier. The dog's ears were perked, his eyes sharp, nose twitching against the wind, already sensing that something was wrong. Lisa Carter stood at the rear of the SUV, eyes fixed on her tablet. Her fingers moved quickly, scanning blueprints of the building ahead. "This is it," she said, barely above a whisper. "The lease is held by a shell company tied to the same offshore account that paid Hale. We're not chasing ghosts anymore, Jack." Monroe gave a curt nod, signaling for the federal task force to fan out. The old steel doors groaned in protest as they were forced open, the sound echoing through the cavernous dark. A thick wave of damp air spilled out, tainted with mildew, oil, and something else, an acrid chemical bitterness that clung to the walls like memory. They entered slowly, weapons drawn, steps silent. It didn't feel abandoned. Rex froze, his head snapping toward a corridor on the left, his body stiffening. Then came the low growl, deep, controlled, primal. Jack's voice was barely a whisper. "He smells something." They followed Rex down the hallway, the concrete walls stained with water damage and faded graffiti. The corridor ended at a reinforced steel door with a biometric scanner. "Lisa," Jack murmured. She was already there, kneeling at the panel. "Military-grade encryption, but I've seen this type before. Give me a minute." While she worked, Jack's gaze swept over the hall. The walls felt too thick, too deliberate. This wasn't just a storage space. Something was being hidden. With a soft beep, the door clicked open. Inside was another world. The room glowed with dim blue light, rows of servers humming along one wall. Dozens of steel filing cabinets lined the opposite side, each marked with a date and set of initials. But the centerpiece was the table in the center, covered in neatly arranged folders. Jack reached out, flipping open one of the folders. Children. Photographs paper-clipped to intake forms, birth dates, medical histories, family details. "Jesus," Jack breathed. "This isn't just trafficking, it's cataloging, profiling. They were building dossiers." Lisa stepped beside him, scanning the pages. Each file has tracking codes, shipment logs. Some are crossed out. Some are marked with R and a date. Jack flipped open another folder. His pulse quickened. Emily Carter, the name read, followed by Emma Sullivan, Noah Mitchell. Lisa's voice trembled. They weren't random. They were chosen. At that moment, Rex let out a short bark, not one of alarm, but focus. Jack turned to see the dog nosing at a far corner of the room, near an unassuming wall of rusted filing cabinets. Rex pawed once, then twice, his claws scraping against metal. Monroe stepped forward, pulled a cabinet aside, and discovered a hidden door behind it. It clicked open. The air inside felt colder, tighter. A small, insulated room. 3 monitors blinked faintly, showing grainy black and white feeds from different angles. A forest trail, a coastal dock, and a dim hallway in another basement. The cameras were still live, broadcasting in real time. Lisa's eyes widened. They're still operational, remote surveillance. These feeds are being streamed to where? She stared at the code flickering at the bottom of the screens. Encrypted, but I can trace it. It'll take some time. Jack stepped back, his gaze fixed on the blinking footage. Somewhere out there, someone was still watching. Someone was still in control. And Rex? Rex was focused on the 3rd monitor, the one showing the hallway. His body had gone rigid, his tail low, a growl vibrating in his chest. Jack squinted at the screen. The hallway in the feed had a mark, barely visible, a crescent moon carved into the plaster of the wall. A cold weight settled in Jack's gut. "I've seen that before," he muttered. "Where?" Lisa asked, brow furrowed. "Old intel. During the Serpent's takedown, 10 years ago. That symbol marked safe houses, places they used for temporary storage. People, not products." The weight of those words hit them both at once. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Jack turned to Lisa, his voice sharp. "Can you trace the feed now?" She nodded. "If I can get back to HQ, yes. But it's bouncing through 4 international relays. It's deliberate." Monroe's eyes shifted back to the files. Hundreds of them. Children cataloged like inventory. Most marked, some missing, others with a dark X. "Do we have any live names?" he asked, his voice low. Lisa scanned the most recent log. 7 kids, 5 still unaccounted for. He didn't speak for a moment. The gravity of it settled over him, thick and suffocating. "Then we're not letting another one vanish." Behind them, Rex gave a short bark, not a warning, but a push forward, urging them toward action. Monroe took one last look at the monitors. Somewhere out there, behind encrypted lines and steel doors, children were still waiting. And the man behind the mask, whoever he was still watching. The sea was restless that morning. Gray clouds hung low over the horizon, cloaking the ocean in a somber haze. Waves slapped against the hull of the FBI tactical boat as it sped toward the remote coordinates, an isolated speck of land off the Washington coast. Jack Monroe stood at the bow, rain spattering against his jacket, his jaw set tight beneath the brim of his cap. His fingers curled around the cold metal railing, eyes fixed on the approaching island like a man staring at the edge of a storm. Beside him, Rex crouched low, his fur soaked, but his gaze unwavering, alert, as though sensing danger ahead before anyone else did. The island was no more than 2 square miles, thick with pine trees and bramble, its shoreline jagged like broken teeth. Hidden in its center stood the estate of Franklin Ward, a name that, until 72 hours ago, had meant nothing more than charity dinners and smiling photos in Forbes. But behind that polished facade, Monroe now knew, was the monster they had been hunting, the masked man, the architect of Hale, of Klein, of everything. Monroe's voice was low through the radio. "Team A, circle around the eastern perimeter. Team B, hold until I give the word. He won't run unless he sees us." Rex let out a soft growl, his body pressing against Monroe's leg. "He knows," Monroe muttered under his breath. The infiltration was swift, almost surgical. The team moved through the estate's outer wall in silence, boots muffled against the wet underbrush. The house was larger than Monroe had imagined. Not a home, but a compound. Reinforced glass, steel-reinforced doors, surveillance towers hidden in the tree line. Ward had prepared for something. Maybe not them, but something. Inside, the estate felt cold and pristine, the smell of chlorine and cedar cutting through the air. It didn't feel like a place where children had lived. "Third floor is clear," Agent Lisa Carter's voice came through the comms. Monroe moved quickly, sweeping the second floor. It was Rex who halted first, ears snapping forward, tail rigid. The dog padded toward a closed door, his nose twitching violently. Monroe followed, hand resting on his sidearm, heart pounding in his chest. He kicked the door open. The room beyond was narrow, windowless, sterile, barren. 3 cots bolted to the floor. In the far corner, huddled under a threadbare blanket, sat Noah Mitchell. The boy was pale, his cheeks hollow, but his eyes, the moment they met Monroe's, were wide, filled with something fierce. "Hope, Noah," Monroe breathed, lowering his weapon. Rex moved first, slow and deliberate, as if he understood sudden movements might break the fragile trust. He crossed the room and gently laid his head in Noah's lap. The boy didn't flinch. He touched Rex's ears with trembling fingers and cried. 2 other children were found in the adjoining room, girls, no older than 9. One had scabbed wrists. The other clutched a dirty stuffed bear so tightly her knuckles had gone white. They didn't speak, but when Rex sat beside them, they leaned into his warmth without hesitation. "They're alive," Monroe said into the comms, his voice tight with emotion. "Repeat, they're alive." Then everything changed. A tremor shook the floor beneath them, the hum of machinery vibrating through the walls. "Monroe, he's triggering the underground system," Lisa's voice crackled through the comms. "There's a tunnel. Thermal scan shows movement. Someone's heading for the tree line." "Ward." Monroe was already moving. "Team A, cut him off at the West Ridge. I'm going after him." The rain came heavier now, the forest slick with mud and tangled roots. Rex was ahead of him, a dark blur weaving through the trees, driven by something primal: instinct, memory, justice. Monroe followed, lungs burning, vision narrowing. They found him at the edge of a ravine. Franklin Ward, dressed in black, his face bare and slick with sweat. He was older than Monroe had expected, but the look in his eyes was ageless, cold, calculating, inhuman. "You're too late," he said, even as he panted, the words sharp with venom. Monroe didn't raise his weapon. He stepped closer. "You had them locked in cages like animals." Ward tilted his head, a cold smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "And yet, you keep one on a leash." Rex growled, low and guttural. Ward's smile faltered. "They were just numbers to you," Monroe said, his voice low. "Files on a hard drive. Do you even remember their names?" "Names are temporary," Ward whispered. "Cycles are eternal." He lunged, not at Monroe, but toward the ravine. Rex was faster. In a blur of fur and fury, the German Shepherd launched forward, teeth sinking into Ward's arm. The two fell together, crashing into the mud. Monroe sprinted forward, grabbing Rex's harness just as Ward thrashed beneath them. The agents arrived seconds later, pulling Ward to his feet, cuffing him as he struggled, spitting blood. "There will always be another me," Ward hissed, blood dripping from his lips. "You can't stop the cycle." And maybe that's true, Monroe thought, his jaw clenched. But for now, the cycle had cracked, and the children were alive. Franklin Ward was in custody before the sun had fully risen. The sky over the harbor was still bruised with storm clouds, the air thick with the bitter scent of salt and diesel. He sat in the interrogation room like he owned it, back straight, hands resting neatly on the table, not a bead of sweat on his brow. To the world, Ward was the man who had built schools in Haiti, funded children's hospitals, and delivered impassioned TED Talks about philanthropy and progress. But behind the mask of compassion was the architect of something far darker, a trafficking empire spun through non-profits and shell companies, hidden beneath layers of good intentions. Jack Monroe stood behind the two-way mirror, jaw set, eyes hard. Lisa Carter stood beside him, tablet in hand. "Voice analysis confirms it," she said quietly. "It's him." Monroe didn't nod. His gaze never wavered from the room. Rex sat at his feet, still, his body taut. His eyes were locked on the glass, ears twitching with every word Ward spoke, or didn't speak. Inside the room, Ward barely blinked as Agent Patrick Reed began the questioning. "We know everything," Reed said, his voice calm and deliberate. "The offshore accounts, the serpents, the recordings, the warehouse files." The island Ward smiled softly. "You know what I allowed you to find." Reed's jaw tightened, but he didn't take the bait. "You traffic children, Franklin," Reed said, his tone hardening. "You used your foundation to launder money, move people, erase records. You manipulated the system so well it took a therapy dog and a 5-year-old to bring you down." Ward leaned back, his voice still unnervingly calm. "That's what fascinates me. You had databases, satellites, millions in government funding, and still, it was the silence of a little girl that cracked it." Reed's voice sharpened, an edge of anger creeping in. "Why children?" Ward paused, as if the question required some deliberation. "Because the world forgets them," he said softly, almost wistfully. "Runaways, foster kids, broken homes, they're invisible. And when they vanish, no one looks long enough, except you, because a dog growled." Outside, Monroe's hands curled into fists, his jaw tightening with fury. Lisa whispered beside him, "He's not afraid." "No," Monroe replied, his voice low. "He doesn't think this ends here." Inside, Ward looked up at the camera, his gaze direct, piercing, almost as if he were speaking to them through the glass. "Do you really think it stops with me?" he asked, his voice laced with a quiet certainty. "There will always be another mask, another man with resources, patience, and purpose." Reed stood, his face hardening. "Your purpose ends here." As the agents began preparing to escort Ward out, the door opened. Monroe stepped in, silent. Rex followed, his gaze never leaving Ward. The man's expression shifted, not fear, not surprise, but something colder, something calculating, as though he were trying to decipher the creature standing at Monroe's side. "Well?" Ward asked, his voice a quiet challenge. "The silent witness?" Rex didn't growl, he didn't move. He simply stared, unwavering. His body was taut, like a bowstring drawn tight, but there was something deeper in his gaze, something that wasn't just instinct. It was memory. Ward leaned slightly forward, his lips curling into a knowing smile. "You remember me, don't you?" Monroe gave a short command, his voice calm but firm. "Back." Rex didn't budge. "Funny," Ward murmured, his smile growing. "I underestimated him. Not a tool, not a pet, but something more." He turned his gaze to Monroe. "You should study him. The bond, the transfer of trauma. That's where the real future lies." "Shut up," Monroe said, his voice quiet but cutting. At that moment, the door opened again. Small, hesitant footsteps padded in, determined yet unsure. Emily Carter. The courtroom team had warned against it. She'd already been through too much, but it was Emily who had asked to see the man behind the mask, to face him. She walked in slowly, her hand resting gently on Rex's back, her hair tucked behind her ears, her cheeks pale but composed. When she stopped, she didn't look at Ward. She looked at Rex, and Rex, in turn, looked up at her, as if waiting. Ward gave a soft chuckle. "Brave little thing. You came to see the monster." Emily's eyes flicked to him, her expression faltering for the briefest moment. The ghost of fear was there, barely perceptible, but it was gone before it could even take hold. She gripped Rex's fur tighter and stepped forward. Rex shifted, not lunging, but rising, his posture telling the room everything it needed to know. If Emily hadn't been there, he wouldn't have held back, Monroe thought, his chest tight with the weight of what that meant. Ward saw it too. "You've trained him well," he whispered. "Or maybe he trained you." Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. She placed her hand gently on Rex's chest, shaking her head. "Not like this." Monroe watched it all. It wasn't just bravery he saw. It was something more powerful, control. A girl who had every reason to hate, to fear, to lash out, choosing instead to stop the cycle, not through violence, but through presence, through healing. Ward was pulled to his feet, handcuffed. The agents led him away, his last words echoing in the sterile hallway. "You can't stop the cycle," Monroe murmured, his voice steady, yet filled with a quiet weight. Monroe lowered himself to the grass beside Emily, his gaze softening as she looked up at him. "You just did." "And Rex?" His tail gently swept the earth beneath him as he leaned into Emily's side, his calm breath a steady rhythm against the stillness of the moment. In the soft sunlight, the mask was gone, the darkness dissipating for the first time. It began with sunlight, after weeks of oppressive gray skies that clung to Seattle, stubborn and unyielding. But on the morning after Franklin Ward's arrest, something changed. The clouds parted, and a gentle warmth spilled over the city, like the quiet caress of a long overdue blessing. The light spread, soft and unhurried, through hospital windows, safe houses, and across the Carter home's front porch, where silence had once reigned, frozen in time. Emily Carter sat cross-legged on the front steps, her sweatshirt sleeves pulled over her hands, eyes tracing the path of Rex. The dog, ever her constant, rolled lazily on his back, paws upturned, tail sweeping the grass in lazy circles. A sound, a giggle, bubbled up from deep inside her. Not a whisper this time, but a real, full laugh. Inside the house, Sarah Carter froze, her tea forgotten as she listened. The sound, a laugh, unrestrained and pure, danced through the air, and she found herself trembling, her hands shaking as she set the mug down. She turned to Monroe, her voice a breathless whisper, too fragile to break the moment. "That's the first time I've heard her laugh like that." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Monroe's lips curved into a small, understanding smile. "She's not just healing, she's reclaiming." Sarah exhaled slowly, wiping at her eyes as the weight of the moment fell over her. "I don't know how to thank you." Monroe shook his head, his tone warm but firm. "You don't have to thank me. Thank him." He nodded toward the window, where Emily now sat beside Rex. Her small fingers combed through his thick fur, pausing every so often to trace the scar along his flank. Soft words, words only meant for him, slipped from her lips, so quiet, so intimate. "You found me when I couldn't call for help," she whispered. "You were my voice." Rex blinked up at her, his dark eyes full of understanding, then rolled onto his side, his head nestling into her lap. And in that small, quiet patch of grass, they stayed, no longer broken, no longer discarded, but two souls forever bound, saving each other in the only way that mattered. At the FBI field office, the final touches were being made on a new display. The hallway, typically reserved for agents and staff, was silent, but at its center, just below the wall of honor, a single framed photo was placed. Under the inscription, "In honor of silent courage," it stood. A photograph of Rex, alert, muddy, worn from the search, yet beautifully raw in its truth. Monroe stood a few paces back, arms crossed, watching the installation with a soft, unreadable expression. Lisa Carter joined him, her gaze flickering to the photo before turning back to him. "You know," she said softly, "that dog did more than half the agents I've worked with." Monroe gave a faint smirk. He doesn't care about red tape, just instincts. Lisa tilted her head slightly, a question in her eyes. "He's staying with them, right?" "The Carters?" Monroe nodded, his gaze never leaving the photo. "There's no place else he belongs." He paused, then added, quieter this time. "Emily sleeps through the night now." "And she talks," Lisa said, her voice softening with a warmth that reached her eyes. Monroe nodded, a slight smile pulling at his lips. Good. They stood in silence, the quiet hum of the building filling the space around them. Outside, the headline screamed with victory. Billionaire behind bars. FBI breaks child trafficking ring. Each headline a small piece of truth falling into place. The serpents had been gutted, their operation shattered, but not forgotten. "Do you think it's really over?" Lisa asked, her voice quieter now, filled with a trace of uncertainty. Monroe's jaw tightened. His gaze, steady and unyielding, told a different story. Not completely. Lisa's brow furrowed. "There's always someone watching, someone waiting." She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "You scared?" Monroe shook his head, the faintest hint of a smile playing at his lips. "Number? Because now they know we're watching too." Later that afternoon, Monroe walked through the park, his coat fluttering in the breeze. Rex trotted beside him, leash trailing loosely. He slowed when he saw Emily again, this time running with another little girl, the sound of her laughter filling the air. Rex stopped too, tail wagging as he spotted her. She turned, saw them, and sprinted toward them, her joy uncontained. "Rex!" she squealed, reaching out to wrap her arms around his neck. Her face buried itself in his fur, the bond between them stronger than any words could capture. Then she pulled back, looking up at Monroe. "Agent Jack," she said, her voice clear and full of newfound confidence. Monroe raised an eyebrow, a small smirk curling his lips. "Sure, that's new," he teased. She giggled again, her voice light. "Mom says you like being mysterious," he chuckled. "Only on Thursdays." Emily sat on the grass, cross-legged, and Rex curled up beside her, his eyes soft with quiet loyalty. She reached out, her small hand resting gently on his head, her voice quieter now, a sacred understanding between them. "He's not just a dog," she whispered, her words filled with the weight of everything they had been through. "He's my voice, my hero." Monroe stood a few feet away, his gaze on them both, soft but sure. "Yeah," he murmured, "mine too." Above them, the sun climbed higher, scattering golden light through the treetops. The world still held its shadows, silent, watchful, but in this moment, light had returned. And Rex? Rex was watching, always. Subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories of resilience and hope, and don't forget to share this video with friends and family. Your support helps us continue this vital work, one life at a time. Let's keep the flame of compassion burning brightly, because together, we can make miracles happen. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.